Human shared his last light with an exhausted alien girl, only to learn why she feared the dark. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's return to our main character. The wind scraped across the barren outpost like a steel brush, carrying dust that hissed against Ethan Cole's visor. The temperature gauge on his wrist display flickered between freezing points as the last maintenance beacon sputtered behind him, its glow fading into a thin, trembling thread of light. He steadied his breathing. Nights on this moon always felt too big, too silent, like the darkness had weight. That small beacon was the final working light source within miles, and even it seemed ready to surrender. Ethan adjusted the portable lamp strapped to his chest plate, his last reliable light. Battery at 12%. Enough for a short inspection run. Not enough for heroics. A soft noise cut through the static hum of the wind, something too fragile to belong out here. He swept his beam across the rocks. For a moment, nothing moved. Only jagged shadows stretching like long fingers across the ground. Then the light caught something pale blue and trembling. A girl. Alien, small, curled tightly into herself at the base of a weathered boulder. Her skin glimmered faintly, like moonlit frost, but her breathing was uneven, each inhale a stuttering gasp. Ethan crouched slowly, keeping the light steady. "Hey," he said gently, unsure if she understood English. She didn't answer. Her eyes stayed shut, but each time his lamp shifted even slightly away from her, her fingers tightened on the gravel. She wasn't reaching for him. She was reaching for the light. His HUD blinked. Unknown life form detected. Exercise caution. But the caution drained out of him as he watched her flinch when a shadow passed over her. Fear like that wasn't a threat. It was a plea. Ethan unlatched the lamp from his chest and angled it closer so the glow pooled around her. "It's okay," he murmured. "You can stay in the light." Her eyes opened just a sliver, silver blue, glossy with exhaustion. She whispered something, so faint his suit barely caught it. "Don't let it go dark." The wind surged again, rattling the rocks, and Ethan's lamp flickered in response. Battery at 9%. He swallowed. He could turn back now and make it to the outpost safely. Save the remaining light. Do what protocol demanded. But instead he stayed there with her, kneeling in the cold dust, as if the circle of light they shared was its own kind of shelter. The girl's breathing eased, just barely. Ethan glanced at the dim horizon, then at the lamp in his hands. "I won't," he said quietly, though the promise cost him more than she could ever know. Battery at 8%, the warning flashed again. He ignored it. Out here, some things mattered more than power readings. And tonight, someone else needed the light more than he did. The portable lamp glowed softly against the stone as Ethan adjusted its angle, widening the circle of light around the girl. The wind had settled into a low hum, like the whole desert plain was holding its breath. Her silver blue eyes followed every flicker, every pulse in the lamp's beam, as if the darkness itself were a tide ready to rise the moment the light dipped. Ethan checked the battery again. 7%. The digits blinked in a patient, merciless rhythm. He exhaled slowly, steadying his nerves. "You can hear me, right?" he asked, his voice low so it would not startle her. She nodded once, the movement small, like someone remembering how to respond after a long silence. Her breathing eased another fraction. Her skin seemed almost luminescent up close, reflecting the lamp in soft ripples of color. Exhaustion clung to her in ways even the cold could not explain. Ethan felt the weight of the empty horizon pressing on them. There was no shelter for miles except the outpost behind him, and even that was barely holding together. He glanced toward it, a dim silhouette against the far edge of night. "We should get you inside," he said gently. "It is warmer there. Safer." Her fingers curled slightly on the gravel. "Is there light?" Ethan hesitated. Inside the outpost, most systems were offline. The main lights were dead. Only emergency strips along the floor still glowed a soft amber. To her, that might not be enough. "Yes," he answered, choosing the word like stepping out onto thin ice. "There is light." She let out a slow exhale, almost a shiver of relief. Ethan slid one arm beneath her shoulders. She was lighter than he expected, her frame delicate, but not fragile. She tried to stand, but her legs trembled from fatigue, and she leaned into him with quiet trust. He kept the lamp raised high so the shadows around them stayed gentle. "What is your name?" he asked as they began to walk. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Mira." The way she said it carried a softness that made him pause. "I am Ethan," he replied. "You are going to be all right." The ground was uneven, but Mira kept her gaze locked on the lamp, as if it were the only thing holding her to the present. Each time it flickered, even faintly, her breath hitched. Ethan adjusted the settings, dialing the beam narrower and brighter to conserve power while keeping the glow strong. Battery at 6%. He felt the pressure of every step, every minute shaved away by distance. The outpost looked farther than it should, a dark square against a darker world. Myra's voice broke the quiet again. "You are not afraid of the dark?" Ethan almost laughed, but the sound stayed in his chest. "I am," he admitted. "I just try not to let it decide things for me." Mira considered that, her eyes reflecting the light in a sheen of silver. "My people, the dark remembers us. It holds echoes. It shows things we cannot bear." Ethan did not fully understand, but the tremor in her words told him enough. Fear did not need full translation. "Then we keep the light on," he said simply. Battery at 5%. The wind picked up again, brushing sand across their boots. Mira leaned closer, not out of fear of him, but out of fear of losing the glow. Ethan tightened his grip on the lamp. Ahead, the outpost lights flickered faintly, like distant fireflies. They were close, but the battery counter dropped to 4%, and a soft warning tone pulsed through the quiet. Ethan steadied his breath. "Just a little further," he whispered, unsure if he was reassuring her or himself. Myra's eyes stayed on the beam, trusting it, trusting him, and the darkness around them continued to wait, patient and still. Just beyond the edge of their fragile circle of light, the amber glow of the outpost's emergency strips came into view as Ethan guided Mira up the shallow rise toward the entrance. The light was faint, only a thin ribbon along the metal floor panels inside, but Myra's shoulders eased the moment she saw it. Even the suggestion of illumination steadied her breathing. The portable lamp in Ethan's hand dimmed again, the beam tightening to a narrow cone. Battery at 3%. He kept his voice calm. "Almost inside. Just a few more steps." Mira nodded, her silver blue eyes fixed on the doorway as though it were a promise she had dared not imagine earlier. When they reached the airlock, Ethan pressed the control panel. The door slid open with a soft mechanical sigh, releasing a gentle draft of warmer air. Mira hesitated at the threshold, glancing at the corners where the amber strips did not reach. Shadows pooled like dark water. Ethan lifted the lamp slightly, widening the circle of light around her. "You are safe," he assured her. "There is nothing here that will harm you." She stepped forward, careful and deliberate, like someone crossing into a place that held both hope and memory. Inside, the hum of the outpost's systems echoed faintly through the corridors. Most lights were offline, but the emergency strips cast a soft glow along the walls, guiding them deeper into the station. Mira stayed close to the lamp, but her movements were steadier now. "You live here alone?" she asked quietly. "For now," Ethan replied. "Remote assignments tend to send people elsewhere. I got comfortable fixing things no one sees." Mira touched the wall lightly, tracing the amber reflection with her fingertips. "Your outpost feels quiet," she said. "Calm." Ethan smiled at that. "Most people would say it feels empty." She tilted her head. "Empty is different from quiet." Ethan paused at that, absorbing her words. There was a gentle clarity in the way she spoke, as though she noticed the small truths other people passed by. The portable lamp flickered, pulling his attention. Battery at 2%. The brief pulse of dimness made Myra's breath catch. Ethan steadied the lamp immediately. "The emergency lights will stay on," he reminded her, "even if this runs out." She nodded, though her gaze lingered on the shrinking glow. He guided her into the main control room, where a portable heater and a few functioning consoles offered a sense of comfort. He set the lamp on a nearby counter so the glow spread across the space, softening the angles of metal and shadow. Mira lowered herself onto a bench, her exhaustion finally catching up to her. "Thank you," she whispered, "for staying with me out there." Most would not have stopped. Ethan shrugged lightly. It looked like you needed help. She studied him for a moment, as though trying to understand something deeper. You gave your last light to someone you did not know. Ethan did not answer right away. He checked a nearby console instead, confirming power levels and system stability. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer. Sometimes you do what feels right, even if you do not know why at the moment. Mira wrapped her arms loosely around herself, comforted by the warmth and the ambient glow. My people do not understand that kind of choice, she murmured. Light is not something we share. It is something we guard. Ethan looked at her, puzzled but patient. Why? She hesitated, her gaze drifting toward the far end of the room where the shadows thickened. Because the dark remembers us, she said quietly. And when the dark remembers, it listens. Ethan waited for her to continue, but she closed her eyes, gathering strength instead. The lamp dimmed again. 1%. Mira opened her eyes at the flicker, not with panic this time, but with the trust she had begun to place in him. If it goes out, she said softly, do not leave. Ethan sat on the bench beside her, keeping the lamp steady as its light thinned like the last ember of a fire. I will not leave, he promised. And the darkness at the edge of the room seemed to pause, held back not by the lamp, but by the quiet certainty in his voice. The last percent of the portable lamp faded to a pale thread of light as Ethan adjusted it on the counter, doing everything he could to stretch the glow a little longer. Mira watched it with quiet focus, her silver blue eyes tracking every pulse in the beam as if she were listening to something he could not hear. The soft hum of the outpost systems wrapped around them, steady and calm, a comforting contrast to the silent stretches of dark beyond the emergency strips. Ethan moved to the supply drawer, hoping to find a backup cell he might have overlooked. He checked each compartment carefully, lifting old tools, spare wiring, and a small stack of thermal blankets. Nothing with a charge. He closed the drawer gently and turned back toward Mira. She sat upright on the bench, hands folded on her lap, her gaze anchored to the weakening lamp. Even with the safety of the emergency lighting, she looked as if a single deep shadow could unravel her calm. The heater should make this room warm enough, Ethan said as he adjusted the thermostat. It will help you rest. Mira nodded, absorbing the warmth spreading slowly through the space. Your outpost, she said softly, feels like a shelter built by someone who understands loneliness. Ethan paused at that. I guess I have had enough of it to know what it looks like. Mira studied him for a long moment, her expression gentle. Do you choose to be alone? Ethan leaned against the console, folding his arms loosely. Not exactly. Most people prefer larger stations, bigger crews. I do better with things that need fixing. Machines do not argue. Mira tilted her head. People do. He gave a faint smile. Some more than others. The lamp flickered sharply, its beam shrinking into a small, trembling glow. Myra's shoulders tensed. Ethan stepped closer, placing his hand near the lamp as if shielding it from the air. You said the dark remembers your people, he said quietly. What does that mean? Myra's eyes lowered. She took a slow breath, as if choosing her words carefully. Where I come from, we do not see the dark as an absence of light. It is a presence, an old one. It carries the echoes of those who came before us, especially those who passed with fear in their hearts. Ethan listened, sensing how heavy this truth was for her. When our world lost its sons, she continued, the shadows grew deep. They held the memories of loss. Not visions, not ghosts, but impression, emotion, the weight of everything left unresolved. She glanced toward the far wall, where the emergency lighting thinned into a muted haze. When I was young, I wandered away during a power outage. I remember the dark folding around me. It felt like 1,000 whispers. Not words, just the feeling of everything my people had feared. Ethan moved a little closer, careful not to cast a shadow between her and the lamp. Is that why you came here? He asked gently. Were you running from it? She shook her head. I was looking for something else. A place where the dark does not speak. She hesitated, then met his gaze. Out there, when I thought the lamp would fail, I heard the edges of it again. That is why I could not stop following the light. Ethan felt something tighten in his chest, not pity, but understanding. Fear was heavier when carried alone. The lamp gave another dim flicker. 0%. A soft tone sounded, and the beam shrank fast. Mira inhaled sharply, bracing for the moment it would end. Ethan reached out and steadied the lamp with both hands, as if the gesture itself could delay the inevitable. "Stay with me," he said softly. Mira nodded, her eyes fixed on his instead of the fading glow. The beam dimmed to a faint ember, then began its final fade, but Ethan did not move away. Just before the light disappeared completely, he said, with quiet certainty, "You are not facing it alone this time." And in that small, warm circle of near darkness, the fear that had chased her across worlds paused, held back not by brightness, but by the steady presence beside her. The last glow of the lamp dissolved into the room like a breath fading in cold air, leaving only the soft amber strips along the floor to steady the space. Myra's eyes stayed open, searching the corners instinctively, as if waiting for something to emerge from the deeper shadows. Ethan stayed right beside her, not touching, but close enough that she could sense his presence in the dim. The room felt different without the portable beam. Quieter, more intimate. The darkness no longer pushed at the walls. It simply lived there, muted by the hum of the outpost systems. Ethan looked over the consoles again, checking power allocation. The emergency grid held steady at 20%, enough to keep the room warm and softly lit, but not enough to activate full overhead lighting. He knew better than to make promises about restoring it quickly. "How are you feeling?" he asked gently. Mira listened for a moment. Not to him, but to the air. Then she exhaled. "It is quieter here," she said. "The dark does not press as loudly." Her voice carried a fragile steadiness, the kind someone used when learning to trust their surroundings. She shifted on the bench, letting her shoulders relax as the heater's warmth reached her. Ethan noticed the small change, a sign that she was not bracing herself the way she had outside. "You said you were searching for a place where the dark does not speak," he said. "How long have you been wandering?" Mira lowered her gaze, her fingers tracing a faint arc on the bench's surface. "My home dimmed slowly," she said. "Our twin suns began to fail when I was young. The light changed first. It thinned. It grew colder." She paused, gathering her thoughts like fragile pieces. Then the shadows grew deeper. They carried impressions from those who suffered during the darkening years. My people adapted, but some of us felt the echoes too strongly. Ethan understood the weight of what she was saying. Some fears lived in memory. Others lived in the wiring of a species. Mira continued, her voice soft but steady. "I joined a research vessel to study outer star systems, hoping distance would quiet the echoes. But the vessel malfunctioned before we reached our destination. I escaped in a pod. I landed near your outpost." Ethan nodded slowly. "You must have been alone out there for a long time." Mira looked at him then, a quiet honesty glowing in her eyes. "Alone feels different when the dark follows." Ethan felt something in him shift, a pull of empathy stronger than any obligation. The emergency heater hummed softly, casting a warm, low shimmer across the room. Mira lifted her gaze to the thin amber strips along the floor. "Your light is different," she said. "It is simple, honest. It does not carry memory. It just exists." Ethan gave a small, thoughtful smile. "Light is light," he said. "It is the one thing I have always understood how to work with." Myra's expression softened at that. "You shared your last light with me," she whispered. "No one from my world would have done that. Not without knowing who I was." Ethan shrugged gently. "You needed it. That was enough." Mira studied him again, as if recalibrating her understanding of him. She seemed calmer now, grounded by the warmth, the steady hum, and the soft amber glow. "Ethan," she said slowly, when the lamp went out, "I waited for the echo, but it did not come." Ethan's brow furrowed. "Why not?" Mira looked at him, her voice barely above a breath. "Because you were still here." The quiet settled around them like a gentle blanket. The darkness did not deepen. It simply rested at the edges, respectfully held back by presence instead of brightness. And for the first time since she had arrived on this world, Mira did not watch the shadows. She simply breathed. The heater's low hum blended with the faint vibrations running through the metal walls, a steady rhythm that made the outpost feel more like a heartbeat than a machine. Mira sat a little straighter now, her posture no longer tight with fear, her eyes less fixed on the edges of the room. Ethan watched her quietly, sensing the shift in her breathing. It was deeper now, steadier, like someone slowly waking from a long strain of worry. He checked the emergency grid one more time. 19%. Stable enough for several hours. Not ideal, but survivable. When he turned back to Mira, she was studying him with a thoughtful expression. You are different from what I expected humans to be, she said softly. Most species I have met measure trust by what they can gain. But you gave something away without knowing what I had to offer in return. Ethan leaned against the console, crossing his arms loosely. Light seems like a strange thing to charge for. Mira tilted her head slightly, silver blue hair catching the dim glow. On my world, the last of the light became the most valuable resource. It was traded, guarded, rationed. We grew used to believing no one would ever share it freely. Ethan let her words settle. He could hear the echo of entire histories beneath them, the kind of memories that shaped instinct. Well, he said gently, things are different here. Or at least they are in this room. Myra's gaze drifted along the warm amber strips on the floor. This room feels calm, she murmured. Like a place where the dark does not reach. Ethan smiled faintly. That is what I like about working alone. I get to set the atmosphere. She considered that for a moment, then let her eyes lift back to him. Your voice does not carry fear, she said, even when the lamp went out. Ethan hesitated, then shook his head. Not true. I was afraid. I just did not want it to guide my choices. Mira absorbed that with quiet respect. On my world, she said, we are taught that fear is a guide. It warns us, but it also limits us. I always wondered if there was another way to live. Ethan moved closer, not invading her space, but offering presence. There is, he said softly. Sometimes you move forward even when you are afraid. And sometimes that choice makes the difference. Mira watched him with a calm intensity, as though she were taking in the shape of his words more than the words themselves. When I was a child, she said gently, my mother told me that one day the dark might forget us, but we must never forget each other. I did not understand then. But now, she paused. I think maybe she meant something like this. A moment when someone stays, even when the dark grows close. The emergency light flickered slightly, a normal fluctuation in the grid, but Mira did not tense this time. Instead, her gaze stayed on Ethan, steady and trusting. Ethan crouched slightly, so he was closer to eye level with her. Rest for a bit, he said softly. You have been running for too long. Mira exhaled, a gentle release of tension. Will you stay awake? Ethan nodded. For as long as you need. She leaned back against the wall, letting the warmth settle into her bones. Her eyes drifted half-closed, not in fear, but in fragile peace. The echoes are quiet here, she whispered. It has been a very long time since I heard quiet. Ethan watched over her as the room settled into a gentle stillness, the soft amber glow stretching across the floor like a promise neither of them had spoken aloud yet. And for the first time since she had landed on this harsh world, Mira allowed herself to rest. The emergency heater pulsed a steady warmth through the room, and for a while Ethan simply listened to Myra's breathing settle into a calm rhythm. The quiet felt earned, like a small sanctuary carved out of a harsh world. But the stillness did not last. A soft chime sounded from the console, barely audible, yet sharp enough to break the moment. Ethan straightened, scanning the display. The grid report flickered once before stabilizing. That does not sound like a normal alert, Mira said, her voice gentle but aware. Ethan nodded, reading the status lines. The outpost's main battery is dropping faster than it should. Something outside is interfering with the power draw. Mira sat up fully now, her earlier calm shifting to focused attention. Interference from what? Ethan exhaled slowly. Probably the storm. Or maybe debris from your pod. Hard to say, without checking the exterior relays. Mira looked toward the hallway that led to the outer hatch. The amber strips along the floor dimmed slightly with another fluctuation. Not enough to alarm, but enough to change the feel of the room. Ethan noticed her posture tighten, a subtle but undeniable reaction. I can go alone, he said. It should not take long. Mira shook her head immediately. The dark outside is different. Deeper. It holds more memory. You should not go into it alone either. Ethan paused at that. It was the first time she had spoken not from fear, but from concern. If we lose more power, he said gently, the emergency lights might not hold. We need to make sure the grid stays stable. Mira lowered her gaze for a moment, then lifted it again with quiet resolve. Then I will go with you. Ethan studied her. She was still exhausted, still recovering, but something in her tone made it clear she would not let him face the dark without her. You do not have to do that, he said. I know, she replied. But you stayed with me when the lamp went out. I can walk with you now. Her voice trembled only slightly, but her eyes were steady. Ethan felt something warm settle in his chest. Not pride, not heroism, just a shared humanity forming between two people who were not entirely the same. He stood and retrieved a small handheld beacon from the supply drawer, one that emitted a narrow but steady blue-white light. Its lifespan was short, maybe 15 minutes, but it was enough to guide them through the corridor and back. Mira rose beside him, her movements still careful but determined. When he activated the beacon, she flinched instinctively at the sudden brightness, then relaxed as the steady glow settled. It is different from your lamp, she murmured. It does not feel like memory. Just illumination. That is the idea, Ethan said with a gentle smile. They stepped into the hallway. The amber strips illuminated the path ahead in soft, warm tones, while the beacon cast a cool light that stretched in a thin line along the metal walls. Mira walked close enough that their shadows merged into one shape, moving steadily forward. Ethan, she said quietly after a few steps, when I was drifting in the pod, I thought the next light I saw would be my last. He listened without interrupting. But then I saw yours, she continued. Small, fading, but steady. Ethan slowed just enough to meet her gaze. And now it is our light, he said softly. Mira absorbed that, her breath easing. For the first time since he had found her, she looked at the darkness ahead not as a threat, but as something that could be crossed. Together they approached the outer relay room, where the shadows thickened despite the emergency lighting. The beacon flickered once as they neared the door, and Mira instinctively moved closer. Ethan adjusted the beam, steadying the glow. Almost there, he said. Just stay with me. Mira nodded, her voice a quiet echo of trust. I will. And for the first time, the darkness around them seemed to step back, not because of the light they carried, but because of the certainty they carried with it. The relay room door opened with a slow mechanical slide, releasing a faint draft of cooler air that brushed against Ethan's face. The beacon's pale beam reached into the space ahead, revealing rows of metallic panels, diagnostic screens in standby mode, and a cluster of external power conduits that flickered with inconsistent readings. Mira paused just before crossing the threshold. Her eyes moved across the shadows that clung stubbornly to the corners, deeper and heavier here than in the central room. But she did not step back. She waited for Ethan's nod, then followed him inside. The door closed with a soft seal behind them, leaving only the beacon and the faint glow of inactive control strips to guide their view. The interference should be coming from the outer relay, Ethan said quietly, tracing a finger along a panel until the display brightened. Something is draining power, but the storm readings do not explain all of it. Mira approached the display, her presence calm but alert. Could it be residual energy from my escape pod? Ethan considered that, then shook his head. Your pod landed at least half a mile from here. This drain feels too consistent, too deliberate. Mira absorbed that with a frown. You mean it feels like something is taking the light? Her phrasing struck him. He looked up sharply, but not with alarm. With realization. Is that what it felt like to you before? He asked softly. Back on your world? Mira stepped closer to the relay housing. Our suns faded slowly. Some believed it was a natural decline. Others believed the dark was learning, becoming aware of the gaps, filling spaces where the light grew thin. Ethan listened carefully. Is that why you sensed echoes? Because the dark carried memory? Mira nodded. Memory, emotion, fear. It all settles into the places light cannot reach. Not as creatures or shapes. More like impressions that press against the mind. Ethan knelt by the lower conduit, examining a cable that should have been warm but felt surprisingly cold to the touch. Then what is happening here may be similar, but not alive. Probably mechanical. Mira lowered herself beside him, watching as he adjusted the beacon to cast a brighter glow across the components. The moment the light touched the lower relay housing, the cold surface shimmered faintly, reflecting a thin veil of blue. Mira inhaled sharply. That is not part of your outpost. Ethan's brow furrowed. What do you mean? Mira leaned in, studying the faint glow. That color, that pattern, it matches the residual energy of my people's research vessels. It means something from my pod is still active. Ethan felt the pieces shift into place. If part of your vessel's energy signature is still running, It might be interfering with the grid, drawing power from anything nearby. Myra's expression softened with understanding. It is not the dark pressing in. It is a memory of my world reaching for the last familiar source. Ethan looked up at her, the beacon light catching the silver in her eyes. So your pod's core might be the cause. Not something outside. Something you brought with you. Mira did not look ashamed. Only thoughtful. It was a stabilizer designed to keep the pod powered even during long drifts. But if it is damaged, it may be clinging to anything it senses as illumination. Ethan stood, offering her a hand. Then, we can fix it. Or disconnect it. But I will not make you face that alone. Mira accepted his hand, rising with a quiet exhale. This is why the echoes felt faint here, she murmured. The interference was masking them, confusing them. Ethan adjusted the beacon again, aiming it toward the outer access hatch. If we go outside, we need to move quickly. The storm will start up again in less than 30 minutes. Mira stepped closer to the glow, letting it warm her expression. I will follow your lead, she said. Just keep the light steady. Ethan opened the hatch, the cold wind brushing past them like a warning. Do not worry, he said, voice steady as the beacon's glow. I intend to. Together they stepped into the threshold, the beacon casting a long, unwavering path ahead while the outpost behind them hummed softly, waiting for their return. The storm had quieted into a low electric rumble as Ethan and Mira stepped beyond the outpost's threshold, the beacon's thin blue-white beam stretching ahead like a fragile lifeline. The air carried a metallic chill that clung to their skin, making the world feel suspended between night and something older. Mira stayed close to the light, but she no longer watched the shadows with fear. Instead, she watched the horizon, as if sensing the pull of the damaged stabilizer that waited somewhere in the dark. The pod fell near the ridge, she said softly. I remember the angle. The crash tilted the energy core. It must be drawing from anything it can find. Ethan nodded. If we shut it down, the outpost grid should stabilize. They moved carefully across the uneven ground, boots crunching against layers of frost and dust. The beacon flickered once under the pressure of the wind, and Myra's fingers brushed lightly against Ethan's arm, steadying both the light and herself. Do you hear that? She asked after a moment. Ethan paused, listening. At first he heard nothing but the storm's distant hum. Then a faint vibration touched the air, almost like a pulse. That is it, Mira murmured. The stabilizer is trying to keep itself alive. They reached the ridge, a slope of dark, jagged stone that trapped shadows in deep folds. The pod rested halfway down, its metallic shell dented but intact. A faint blue shimmer pulsed from a cracked vent near the base, illuminating the nearby rocks in soft, rhythmic flashes. Ethan angled the beacon toward it. The core is definitely active, he said. It is not dangerous, but it is hungry. It is pulling power from anything with a charge. Mira approached slowly, her steps guided by the beacon's glow. This is technology from my people, she said quietly. It was designed to sustain light in the coldest voids. But without guidance, it clings to whatever it can. Even the dark begins to feel like a companion when it is alone. Ethan opened an access panel on the side of the pod. Inside, wires glowed faintly with residual energy. He set the beacon on the ground to free his hands. Myra's expression softened when the stabilizer's pulse reflected across her skin. It recognizes me, she whispered. Or at least the imprint of what created it. Ethan glanced at her. Can you shut it down? Mira hesitated. Yes, but when I disconnect it, the dark will settle again. There will be no interference left to mask the echoes. Ethan reached out, resting his hand gently near hers without touching. You will not face the dark alone. Not here. Her breath caught, not in fear, but in something like relief. Together they leaned into the open panel. Mira placed her hands on the stabilizer core, and the blue shimmer brightened for a moment, responding to her presence. Then she exhaled slowly and released the override sequence. The pulse faded, the hum quieted, and the faint shimmer dissolved like a sigh disappearing into the air. The world around them dimmed by a fraction, not darker, but quieter. Ethan retrieved the beacon, its lights steady and calm. Mira stood very still, sensing the space around them. The echoes, she whispered, they are faint. Very faint. Like distant memories finally letting go. Ethan watched her face soften, the tension leaving her features. You did it, he said. She turned toward him, her silver-blue eyes glowing with the reflection of the beacon. "We did it," she corrected. The outpost lights in the distance flickered once, then steadied, forming a warm amber line against the horizon. Ethan lifted the beacon to guide their path back. Mira stepped beside him, close enough that their shadows merged again. "Does the dark feel different now?" he asked gently. Mira nodded, her voice soft as the wind. "Yes, for the first time, it feels quiet." They walked back toward the outpost, the beacon lighting their way, the night no longer pressing but simply watching. And in that fragile glow, Mira realized the truth she had feared to name. It was not the dark she had been running from. It was the absence of someone who would stay when the light went out. Ethan walked beside her, steady and calm, and the silence that followed carried no echoes at all, only peace.